So, we continue the Viking Portable Library World Bible, edited by Robert O. Ballou, in the Confucianist section. Connection meets forming identity, and forming identity obviously has more to teach the one trying to make connections. And we go into now from the works of Mencius, the function of government. King Hui of Liang said, "Small as my virtue is, and the government of my kingdom, I do indeed exert my mind to the utmost. On examining the government of the neighboring kingdoms, I do not find that there is any prince who employs his mind as I do, and yet the people of the neighboring kingdoms do not decrease, nor do my people increase. How is this?" Mencius replied, "If the seasons of husbandry be not interfered with, the grain will be more than can be eaten. If close nets are not allowed to enter the pools and ponds, if the fishes and turtles will be more than can be consumed. If the axes and bills enter the hills and forest only at the proper time, the wood will be more than can be used. When the grain and fish and turtles are more than can be eaten, there is more wood than can be used. This enables the people to nourish their living and bury their dead, without any feeling against any. This condition in which the people nourish their living and bury their dead is without any feeling against any, is the first step of a royal government. I live in a country that, if the ancient ways be revived, based on the current technology, the ancient principles of the pastoral people, we could feed 20 billion people out of California and still be a bunch of alcoholics. We could feed billions more. So this idea where there's not enough resources and, if 84% of the taxes is direct and indirect welfare for the rich, we're not running out of money to feed the poor. 1% of the federal tax going towards food stamps and school lunch programs and stuff like this is like, come on, more than enough resources. This is the purpose of government, not, Let mulberry trees be planted about the homesteads, and persons of 50 years may be clothed with silk, and keeping fowls, pigs, dogs, and swine. Let not their times of breeding be neglected, and persons of 70 years may eat flesh. Let there be taken away the time that is proper for the cultivation of the farm and the family. Of several mouths that is supported by it shall not suffer from hunger. Let careful attention be paid to education in schools, inculcating in it especially the filial and fraternal duties. And gray-haired men will not be seen upon the roads, carrying burdens on their backs or on their heads. It never has been that the ruler of a state where such results were seen, persons of 70 wearing silk and eating flesh, and the black-haired people suffering neither from hunger nor cold, did not attain to the imperial dignity. And so there is some sort of collectiveness that has to be done. There's special care to education, but education is imbibing individuals with a particular system, so we have to look at what that system is. We have to look at how people eat. Is this, are we having meat at a certain stage or a certain amount? Are we having it all the time and not taking care of people because, what, if I can't have meat 3 times a day, how can we give food to these other people? No. That's literally the thoughts that come through some people's minds. Most people are just ignorant. Your dogs and swine eat the food of men, and you do not know how to make any restrictive arrangements. There are people dying from famine on the roads, and you do not know to issue the stores of your granaries for them. When people die, you say, it is not owing to me, it is owing to the year. In what does this differ from stabbing a man and killing him, and then saying, it was not I, it was the weapon. Let your majesty cease to lay the blame on the year, and instantly from all the empire the people will come to you. Woe upon Winston Churchill and all these other so-called heroes that created systems or pushed along systems when they could have done otherwise, at least some, that killed people directly or indirectly, like taking the resources. In your kitchen, there is fat meat. In your stables, there are fat horses. But your people have the look of hunger, and on the wilds there are those who have died of famine. This is leading on beasts to devour men. Beasts devour one another, and men hate them for doing so. When a prince, being the parent of his people, administers his government so as to be chargeable with leading on beasts to devour men, where is that parental relation to the people? You collect your equipments of war, endanger your soldiers and officers, and excite the resentment of other princes. Do these things cause you pleasure in your mind? The king replied, no. How should I derive pleasure from these things? My object in them is to seek for what I greatly desire. Mencius said, may I hear from you what is that you greatly desire? The king laughed and did not speak. Mencius resumed, are you led to desire it because you have not enough of rich and sweet food for your mouth, or because you have not enough of light and warm clothing for your body, or because you have not enough of beautifully colored objects to delight your eyes, or because you have not voices and tones enough to please your ears, or because you have not enough of attendants and favorites to stand before you and receive your orders? Your Majesty's various officers are sufficient to supply you with these things. How can your Majesty be led to entertain such a desire on account of them? No, said the king, my desire is not on account of them. Mencius added, then what your Majesty greatly desires to be known? You wish to enlarge your territories, to have to in and to do await at your court, and to use the Middle Kingdom, and to attract to you the barbarous tribes that surround it. But to do what you do, to seek for what you desire, is like climbing a tree to seek for fish, because desire never ends. Now does it? The king said, is it so bad as that? It is even worse, was the reply. If you climb a tree to seek for fish, although you do not get the fish, you will not suffer any subsequent calamity. But if you do what you do to seek for what you desire, doing it, moreover, with all your heart, you will assuredly afterwards meet with calamities. Now, if your Majesty will institute a government whose action shall be all benevolent, this will cause all the officers in the empire to wish to stand in your Majesty's court, and the farmers all to wish to plow in your Majesty's fields, and the merchants, both traveling and stationary, all wish to store their goods in your Majesty's marketplaces, and traveling strangers all to wish to make their tours on your Majesty's roads. And all throughout the empire, who feel aggrieved by their rulers to wish to come and complain to your Majesty. And when they are so bent, who will be able to keep them back? Mencius said, he who, using force, makes a pretense to benevolence, is a leader of the princes. is the leader of the princes. A leader of the princes requires a large kingdom. He who, using virtue, practices benevolence is the sovereign of the empire. To become the sovereign of the empire, a prince needs not to wait for a large kingdom. Ta'ang did it with only 70 le, and King Wan with only 100. When one by force subdues men, they do not submit to him in heart. They submit because their strength is not adequate to resist. When one subdues men by virtue, in their heart's core, they are pleased and sincerely submit. And thus we see some of the value of Mencius as a philosopher. But remember, he's putting Confucius in a line with the empirical China in more of a light in favor of that. Division of labor. Cheng Tsang, having an interview with Mencius, related, the prince of Ta'ang is indeed a worthy prince. He is not yet heard, however, the real doctrines of antiquity. Now wise and able princes should cultivate the ground equally, along with their people, and eat the fruit of their labor. They should prepare their own meals, morning and evening, while at the same time they carry on their government. But now the prince of Ta'ang and his granaries, treasuries, and arsenals, which is an oppressing of the people to nourish himself, how can he be deemed a real worthy prince? Some say you have to go beyond the Martian stage to become part of the jovial stage. But the Martian stage isn't just about, being victorious on the battlefield. And to reach the Martian stage, you have to go through the solar stage. To reach the solar stage, you have to go through the Venusian stage. To reach the Venusian stage, you have to go through the Mercurial stage. To go through the Mercurial stage, you have to go through the lunar stage. To reach unto the lunar stage, you have to be in the right standing at the earthen stage. That's not written here, by the way. Mencius said, I suppose that Hea Hing sows grain and eats produce. Is it not so? It is so, was the answer. I suppose also he weaves cloth and wears his own manufacture. Is it not so? No. Hea wears clothes of haircloth. Does he wear a cap? He wears a cap. What kind of cap? A plain cap. It is woven by himself. No, he gets it in exchange for grain. Why does Hea not weave it himself? That would injure his husbandry. Does Hea cook his food in boilers and earthenware pans? And does he plow with an iron share? Yes. Does he make those articles himself? No. He gets them in exchange for grain. Mencius then said, the getting of those various articles in exchange for grain is not oppressive to the potter and the founder, and the potter and the founder in their turn, in exchanging their various articles for grain, are not oppressive to the husbandman. How should a thing be supposed? And moreover, why does not act the potter and founder, supplying himself with the articles which he uses solely from his own establishment? Why does he go confusedly dealing and exchanging with the handicraftsman? Why does he not spare himself so much trouble? Cheng Tsang replied, the business of the handicraftsman can by no means be carried on along with the business of husbandry. Well, speciality, specification is important. But society as a whole doesn't need to necessarily go outside for pilgrimages and stuff. Yeah, but for their means, the best food for an area exists in that area. And also the resources to find the produce the clothes. Unless you're like in Antarctica or something, Mencius resumed, "Then is it the government of the empire which can alone be carried on, along with the practice of husbandry. Great men have their proper business, and little men have their proper business. Moreover, in the case of any single individual, whatever articles he can require are ready to his hand, being produced by the various handicraftsmen. If he must first make them for his own use, the way of doing would keep the whole empire running about the roads. Hence, there is a saying, some labor with their minds, and some labor with their strength. Those who labor with their minds govern others. Those who labor with their strength are governed by others. Those who are governed by others support them, and those who govern others are supported by them. This is a principle universally recognized. It is the nature of things to be of unequal quality. Some are twice, some 5 times, some 10 times, some 100 times, some 1,000 times, some 10,000 times as valuable as others. If you reduce them all to the same standard, that must throw the empire into confusion. There are some eclectic people, obviously, but even the eclectic people rely on others in society. But remember the state. I guess I'll save my other comment when I get to the state portion. The flood. In the time of Ya'au, the waters flowing out of their channels inundated the Middle Kingdom. Snakes and dragons occupied it, and the people had no place where they could settle themselves. In the low grounds they made nests for themselves, and in the high grounds they made caves. It is said in the book of history, the waters in their wild course warned me. Those waters in their wild course were the waters of the great inundation. End of the Ice Age, maybe? One of the Ice Ages? China, there's surely evidence that going back 1,000,000 years, there probably would have been stuff passed on to the Chinese culture from all those earlier humans. Shun employed Yu to reduce the waters to order. Yu dug open their obstructed channels and conducted them to the sea. He drove away the snakes and dragons and forced them into the grassy marshes. On this, the waters pursued their course through the country, even the waters of Kiang, the Hua, the Ho, and the Han, and the dangers and obstructions which they occasioned were removed. The birds and beasts which had injured the people also disappeared. After this, men found the plains available to them and occupied them. So going up from the unconscious towards the threshold of consciousness, and the monsters have been dealt with, so now we can go into the land and address the beast of the land, now that we have addressed the inner beast. But, that doesn't mean there weren't metaphysical demons and all sorts of stuff going on. The root of the state. Mencius said, people have this common saying, the empire, the state, the family. The root of the empire is the state. The root of the state is in the family. The root of the family is in the person of its head. There was a boy singing, when the water of Zheonglong is clear, it does to wash the strings of my cap. When the water of the Zheonglong is muddy, it does to wash my feet. Confucius said, hear what he sings, my children. When clear, he will wash his cap strings, and when muddy, he will wash his feet with it. This different application is brought by the water on itself. A man must first despise himself, and then others will despise him. A family must first destroy itself, and then others will destroy it. A kingdom must first smite itself, and then others will smite it. Mencius said, with those who do violence to themselves, it is impossible to speak. With those who throw themselves away, it is impossible to do anything. To disown in his conversation propriety and righteousness is what we mean by doing violence to oneself. To say I am not able to dwell in benevolence or pursue the path of righteousness is what we mean by throwing oneself away. Benevolence is the tranquil habitation of man, and righteousness is his straight path. Alas for them who leave the tranquil dwelling empty and do not reside in it, and who abandon the right path and do not pursue it. And like a couple sections back, the right ruler wants what's right for the world, and thus extends his kingdom, not in persecution, but in ending persecution, not in aggression, but in stifling aggression. The man with the heart of a child. Acts of propriety which are not really proper, and acts of righteousness which are not really righteous, the great man does not do. Those who keep the mean train up those who do not, and those who have abilities train up those who have not, and hence men rejoice in having fathers and elder brothers who are possessed of virtue and talent. If they who keep the mean spurn those who do not, and they who have the abilities spurn those who have not, then the space between them, those so gifted and ungifted, will not admit an inch. Men must be decided on what they will not do, and then they are able to act with vigor in what they ought to do. A great man does not think beforehand of his words, that they may be sincere, nor of his actions, that they may be resolute. He simply speaks and does what is right. The great man is he who does not lose his child's heart. That whereby man differs from the lower animals is but small. The mass of people cast it away, while superior men preserve it. A friendship in gifts. Wang Chang asked Mencius, saying, I venture to ask the principles of friendship. Mencius replied, friendship should be maintained without any presumption, on the ground of one's superior age or station, or the circumstances of his relatives. Friendship with a man is friendship with his virtue, and does not admit of assumptions of superiority. Respect shown by inferiors to superiors is called giving to the noble the observance due to rank. Respect shown by superiors to inferiors is called giving honor to talents and virtue. The rightness in each case is the same. Man's nature is good, unless he wants to corrupt it, right? The tendency of man's nature to good is like the tendency of water to flow downwards. There are none that have this tendency to good, just as all water flows downwards. Now by striking water and causing it to leap up, you may make it to go over your forehead, and by damming and leading it, you may force it up a hill. But are such movements according to the nature of water? It is the force applied which causes them. When men are made to do what is not good, their nature is dealt with in this way. In good years, the children of the people are, most of them, good, while in bad years, the most of them abandon themselves to evil. It is not owing to their natural powers conferred by heaven that they are thus different. The abandonment is owing to the circumstances through which they allow their minds to be ensnared and drowned in evil. Hence, the purpose of ritual is that you maintain. You're building up something. You came in this high status, but things happen. You get exposed to things. You consume things. You let yourself go in your expression, and things happen. All things which are the same in kind are like to one another. Why should we doubt in regard to man, as if he were a solitary exception to this? The sage and we are the same in kind. The trees of the new mountain were once beautiful, being situated, however, in the borders of a large state. They were hewn down with axes and bills, and could they retain their beauty? Still, through the activity of the vegetative life, day and night, and the nourishing influence of the rain and dew, they were not without buds and sprouts springing forward, but then came the cattle and goats, browsed upon them. To these things is owing the bare and stripped appearance of the mountain, which, when people see, they think it was never finely wooded. But is this the nature of the mountain? I remember going to the ape cave in the Mount St. Helens and seeing above the tree line dead. But from most angles, you couldn't see a thing. But is this the fall of the mountain, or some people strip mining and stuff? Well, that's not entirely the point, but anyways. And so, alas, of what properly belongs to man, shall it be said that the mind of any man was without benevolence and righteousness? The way in which a man loses his proper goodness of mind is like the way in which the trees are denuded by axes and bills, hewn down day after day. Can it, the mind, retain its beauty? But there is a development of its life, day and night. And in the calm air of the morning, just between night and day, the mind feels in a degree those desires and aversions which are proper to humanity, but the feeling is not strong, and it is fettered and destroyed by what takes place during the day. This fettering takes place again and again. The restorative influence of the night is not sufficient to preserve the proper goodness of the mind. And when this proves insufficient for that purpose, the nature becomes not much different from that of the irrational animals, which, when people see, they think that it never had those powers which I assert. But does this condition represent the feelings proper to humanity? Some people think, if I just say, in the name of God, or whatever, before they sleep, 1/3 of my life is spiritual, I'm taken care of. Also, the physical and mental regeneration at the night, if you just leave it at that. And then that slips. You don't sleep right. And you don't even dedicate your sleep. And you don't do a little bit here and there. That's, you think you're doing enough. Soon it will become not enough. Or it might, Now chess playing is but a small art, but without his whole mind being given and his will bent to it, a man cannot succeed at it. Could it be Chinese checkers they're talking about? Chess, 'tis El, is the best chess player in all the kingdoms. Suppose that he is teaching two men to play. The one gives to the subject his whole mind and bends to it all his will, doing nothing but listening to chess, 'tis El. The other, although seems to be listening to him, has his whole mind running on a swan, which he thinks is approaching, and wishes to bend his bow, adjusting to string to the arrow and shoot it. Although he is learning along with the other, he does not come up to him. Why? Because his intelligence is not equal. Not so. I like to fish, and I also like to bear's paws. If I cannot have the two together, I will let the fish go and take the bear's paws. So I like life, and also I like righteousness. And if I cannot keep the two together, I will let life go and choose righteousness. Well, bear's paws is a particularly risky food. Same thing with all other predatory animals, but the fierceness and the flowing, right? Well, the strength and the flowing. Anyways, there are cases when men by a certain course might preserve life, and they do not employ it. When by certain things they might avoid danger, and will not do them. Therefore men have that which they like more than life, and that by which they dislike more than death. They are not men of distinguished talents and virtue only, who have this mental nature. All men have it. What belongs to such men is simply that they do not lose it. The disciple Kung Tu said, all are equally men, but some are great men and some are little men. How is this? Mencius replied, those who follow that part of themselves which is great are great men. Those who follow that part which is little are little men. To the mind belongs the office of thinking. By thinking, it gets the right view of things. By neglecting to think, it fails to do this. Let a man first stand fast in the supremacy of the nobler part of his constitution, and the inferior part will not be able to take it from him. It is simply this which makes the great man. So, find your greatness. Convention and emergency. I guess I'll go into that next time around, now won't I?